welcome to the December 5th, 2023 Eugene Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Tiffany Edwards. I'm the chair of the Eugene Planning Commission, and begin this evening, I would like to call on Commissioner Ramey for the city's land acknowledgement statement.
Thank you. Since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. This land acknowledgement is a way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and to honor Native communities by inviting truth and reconciliation. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were disposed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed to the coast reservations in Western Oregon. As we consider the impacts of colonization, we also acknowledge the strength and resiliency of displaced indigenous people. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as Kalapuya Ilihai. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederate Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon, and they continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We express our respect for the inherent political sovereignty of all federally recognized tribal nations and indigenous people who live in the state of Oregon and across the nation. Therefore, the Planning Commission recognizes that what we do today will affect the many generations who will come after us.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Ramey, and thanks to everyone joining us in this virtual meeting format. I should say a hybrid. Today's meeting, we will resume deliberations on the River Road Santa Clara adoption package and potentially vote on a recommendation to City Council on the package of plan and code amendments. Just a couple of housekeeping items and instructions related to the meeting format that I just want to take care of first. Anyone wishing to join the meeting online can do so by following the instructions listed on the agenda for this meeting. Planning Commission meetings can also be viewed by watching the live stream available on our website or the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21. We don't have public testimony tonight, so I don't think we need to have anybody muting a microphone. So, all right, with that, we're gonna move right into deliberations, and I'm going to hand it over to Terry to walk us through some updates.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Terry Harding. I'm the Principal Planner for Community Planning and Design and the Project Manager for the River Road Santa Clara Neighborhood Plan. We're on the home stretch, at least of the Planning Commission process, hopefully, to make your recommendation to the Eugene City Council. And we've prepared some revised materials based on your discussions at your last meeting, which was November 14th, and those can be found in your packet. So this evening, we're going to go through where we are in the adoption process, recap your discussions in the series of straw polls that you took at your last meeting, and ask if there are any changes that you'd like to make this evening. Continue those discussions, and then end with a suggested motion on the adoption package as a whole. So if you'll recall, originally this was the set of proposed documents in the adoption package. There's the neighborhood plan itself. There's amendments to the Metro Plan. There was a proposal to repeal the 1987 Urban Facilities Plan and a set of neighborhood specific code amendments proposed to be adopted. The Planning Commission's role in the adoption process is to make a recommendation on the whole package and modify as you see fit through your deliberations. As a reminder, the Lane County Planning Commission's role is to recommend on the components that involve plan amendments, Metro Plan amendments, and adoption of the neighborhood plan, but not the city code amendments. And they are currently scheduled to deliberate on December 19th if you finish this evening. As you might remember, though, at the meeting on November 14th, you passed a straw poll to remove one of those components from the adoption package. And so I've dropped it off the slide, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. But the attachments have been modified, and they no longer include the repeal of the 1987 Urban Facilities Plan.
Sorry, we've lost the slide sharing.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Balin. Give us a second.
Oh.
See it?
Okay, yes. Dang it.
So as a reminder, at the meeting on November 14th, did it go away again? It did.
Okay.
Okay, we're figuring it out. Maybe. Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
It's back.
Okay. So at the meeting on the 14th, the Planning Commission had a discussion and did a series of straw polls on 3 issues. The code amendments topic of proposed prohibited uses in the C2 zone, the topic of code amendments limiting building height for buildings in the C2 zone, and the repeal of the 1987 Urban Facilities Plan, which I've already foreshadowed the results of that one. We'll go through each of those and we'll pause to see if there's any discussion or questions or desire to do something different than you did at your last meeting. So for the C2 code amendments and prohibited uses, this is the list of new uses that would not be allowed to be established in the neighborhood if this code amendment were to pass. The proposal is to prohibit establishing this list of new uses or expanding existing uses based on the 6 years of neighborhood process, including public input, workshops, and the drafting of the neighborhood plan and code amendment iterations. Reminder that existing uses, so existing businesses that are already in the neighborhood and already established are able to remain in operation. They can also be sold and continue to operate, but they would not be able to expand. Originally, the rationale behind proposing this list of uses was to transform the corridor over time to a more neighborhood scale, thriving mixed use corridor, a walkable district served by frequent transit, biking, and walking. We received some public testimony about this code amendment that caused us to propose a modification. This is a picture of the carve-out option that staff proposed at the last meeting. The original, and a little bit more background on this, the original corridor code was supposed to be applied to the River Road corridor, and through community discussions, it was expanded to off-corridor C2 zoned areas, and I'll show you a map in just a moment as well, because they're in walking distance of many residences and they have the potential to serve daily needs. So that concept of limiting some uses was expanded off the corridor to include the commercial areas on Maxwell and Irvington. But the River Avenue area shown on this picture is unique. The carve-out option proposed by staff would leave the River Avenue area out of the code amendments that add prohibited uses. And that is because this area is a mixture of commercial and industrial businesses. It's adjacent to Beltline and the wastewater treatment plant, and Planning Commission received testimony from property owners, businesses, and their representatives that this would have a big impact on many businesses in the River Road Avenue area. So staff recommended this carve-out option, and the Planning Commission discussed it. They took a straw poll and gave us direction on a 6-to-1 vote that we should pursue this. So we did include this in the revised materials. And I'll just show you the zoning map now. This is actually the neighborhood plan map from page 6 of the neighborhood plan. It does show existing zoning. So all of the light pink is zone C2, and you can see it goes up and down River Road in various areas. And here's a little bit closer view. You can see the label Maxwell near the bottom of the slide. That's a C2 zoned area that's off the corridor. And then up near the top of the slide, on the left-hand side is the Irvington C2 area. So that's just provided to give you a sense of where the properties are in the plan boundary area that are affected by this potential code amendment.
Terry, really quick, is there anything further south or is that?
Yes.
There is a couple.
Yes, but they are on the corridor, so I didn't blow them up because
Okay. No, that's okay.
they were originally part of the corridor code. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. Great. So through discussion, the Planning Commission, as I mentioned, voted in a straw poll to follow the staff recommendation. And now I'd like to pause and ask the Planning Commission if there are any questions or desire to revisit this topic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can't see hands, but if there are, let's see, there we go. All right, I can see you all now. So if anyone, so I guess our question would be, we did straw poll this issue the last time we met, and I think all of you agreed in favor of the recommendation to carve out River Avenue. And so I know I was in opposition to that, and I will just state again, I didn't support, eliminating any business opportunities along the corridor as well. I do know, I've noticed a number of other automotive related businesses further down on the River Road corridor. And so I think just for the same reasons, I chose to support not removing any. So that was why I didn't support the carve out. But having said that, I want to just check in with everybody and make sure that you are all still in support of the carve out. I think that is a good, seems to address the concerns by the businesses that have been engaged. Okay. I have Commissioner, I see your hand now. Sorry. Sorry, Commissioner Fragola, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. If you're just asking for a check-in about where we're at, I still support the carve-out option.
All
so
right.
Thanks for asking.
Perfect. Thank you.
I can say the same thing still in support. I didn't find anything in the testimony that made me feel any different. We did open the record and we had a chance to review that testimony, and now I feel like we're still going in the right direction.
All right. Commissioner Bailing, I see your hand. Oh, you are muted. I don't know if you.
Yes, okay. Yes, I support the carve out also. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, unless, Commissioner Beeson.
Yeah, I supported the carve out. I guess I do support the carve out. I want to say I went away and thinking about it. I am uncomfortable with the overall amendment to prohibit uses out there. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. I understand in the context of it, the carve out, but I do want to, I guess, put out there. I'm struggling a bit with the idea that we would prohibit the uses. Thanks.
Commissioner Lear?
Yeah, I do agree with Commissioner Beeson. And I was just wondering, did we do a straw poll on whether there was any opinion on not prohibiting those uses or not distinguishing this from the rest of the C2 zoning?
Not specifically. We just offered the opportunity to raise any other issue, and we'll have that opportunity again at the end, or we could talk about it now, but it would just be under the category of any other changes that you wish to make.
I might suggest talking about it now, since
if somebody wanted to do that.
If it were the will of the commission to kind of remove all of the prohibited uses, then there would be no need for the carve out. So
right. Okay. Well, so I've kind of stated my reasoning for it. The way I look at River Road in particular, it's a pretty major corridor. And so from my standpoint, I was just thinking more about, while the carve out is predominantly where these businesses are located, this is also an area within the whole community where there is actually, it is identified as a major corridor. And so for that reason, I kind of just felt like this these types of businesses seem appropriate to maintain their existence in that area, or at least in part of that area. And there's, as the map it showed further to demonstrate to me, the C2 is only in certain corners and in certain more busier intersections. It's not the entire length of the corridor. So there is a lot of residential throughout that. But I don't know. My gut feeling was that I just wanted to be able to preserve the business's opportunity that currently exists to expand, or, you know, maintain a viable business if they were to sell or anything like that. So I'll go ahead and call on Commissioner Beeson. If this is an option that the other commissioners want to support, I'm happy to straw poll this, but I want to hear from you all. Commissioner Beeson, go ahead.
Thanks. I'll be brief. I guess as I thought about it over the last few weeks, I just overall, I'm pretty uncomfortable with the idea of this amendment on prohibiting uses. And I think it kind of, when I think about the fact that I'm saying we, I guess as a city, but as a community out there, that there would be development of a refinement plan for one neighborhood in Eugene. And we developed that plan, and then in one zone of that neighborhood, we would prohibit certain uses, certain business uses, basically, that are allowed across the rest of the city. I'm just having trouble kind of reconciling all that. So at this point, I'm really not in support of recommending that to the council.
Okay. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Bailing, go ahead.
Yes, I also am uncomfortable with prohibiting uses. However, my recollection is a lot of that conversation centered around having those sites available for housing and the great need for additional housing in our community. So if that's still a factor, we should continue to weigh this option with the need for housing and consider it in that context as well.
Okay. Commissioner Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm in favor of the carve out. I'd like to echo Commissioner Fragala's comments from the previous meeting, which is that the recommendation that we have before us is not just a culmination of staff time and our time, but it's the work of 5 years of the people who live in River Road. And it's those folks who have put forth the desire to have a neighborhood that doesn't have these particular set of businesses where it makes sense. And we've curtailed that with this carve out so that we are allowing businesses who have been there a long time. It doesn't remove businesses that are already existing. It just means that as we grow over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that we move away from certain types of businesses and mostly fossil fuels. And I think that that's an important statement to make. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to put myself in the queue because I want to respond to that, but I'm going to call on Commissioner Lee right afterwards. If anyone has ever been to the Tesla dealership in Portland that's in the Washington Square, I literally thought of that as it's automotive sales, and it's kind of the new, banks went through this where they were kind of reinventing the way that they, they weren't having the same amount of space with the tellers and everything else. They were doing a lot more kind of just virtual type of things. And I thought of that as the kind of the way business models change over time. And so this is eliminating all motor vehicle sales. And so if the crux of it had to do with something with fossil fuels or whatever else, that's what I was trying to understand. I don't see the correlation between walkability and whether or not, something uses gas power. And so to me, I just didn't, that was the question I asked of Terry, because I thought maybe she could speak to that. Having not been in part of the process, not really understanding what we were trying to get at, because it sounded like it was attempting to make a walkable neighborhood, but those uses don't necessarily prohibit it from being, walkable. So anyway, that was kind of where I was coming from. Maybe any of you who participated know more about that. I would definitely not support that. So I'm going to maintain my position on this. Commissioner Lair, go ahead.
Yeah, got great respect for Commissioner Isaacson's view. But we are a very long time from being a community that doesn't rely substantially on automobiles. People need to have their cars serviced. I think it was you, Commissioner Ramey, last meeting that mentioned, you know, at some point we want to be able to do that in our local community without having to drive 30 minutes in order to accomplish it, which I think is particularly onerous for folks that may not be able to afford that and could very well reduce the amount of service that's available for the rest of the community. There was a time not too long ago that communities did everything they could to preclude certain types of housing from their areas. But I think it's our job as a commission to also step back and say, how do we balance that approach for the entire city when it's likely that other neighborhoods may want to ban certain types of businesses that they don't like that are still essential to have.
All right, Commissioner Fragla, and then Commissioner Ramey.
Great, thank you. So I will acknowledge that I struggled with this one as well. But I think the deciding factor for me was the amount of C2 that is currently impacted is, as we could see on the map, pretty marginal. I'm correct in understanding this is a code that only applies to the C2, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, great. And so I think we had that discussion last time as well about we're talking about a small subset of parcels, and I do think that this is very much in the vision of the work that went into the community plan. And as that developed, we continuously took away tools, or tools were narrowed for the community to achieve their goals. And so this was a tool that was offered as a viable option. So I'm hoping we can honor some of the goals of the neighborhood planning by the tools that we are currently able to offer them to utilize. So I understand some of the concerns. I have really struggled with this one myself personally, but I believe the carve out is an effective solution, and I still support the including these in the code amendments.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Ramey, and then I think we've
been around.
pull a couple.
So yes, the Commissioner Fragla touched on both the issues I was going to bring up, but the first one I want to talk a little bit about is the limit of tools that we have to deal with the issue. The issue is not necessarily about carbon footprints or carbon use or gas use. It's about how do you create a walkable community. If you walk on, say, Martin Luther King Boulevard or Coburg Grade right after the Ferry Street Bridge, that is not a walkable place, but that is filled with car-oriented uses, all those car dealerships along. And the reason they're not walkable is because you want to display what you're trying to sell to the public as they drive by. And so that's what creates the problem, the conflict between being able to walk by there comfortably, because essentially you're walking down an endless stretch of pavement that is bisected occasionally by curb cuts that let cars go in and out. That's not a comfortable place to be. It's not the vision of what this neighborhood wanted. And unfortunately, the only tool we have is to take away these uses. So it's more about the resulting environment than it is about whether they're carbon fuel based or not. I think also the idea, Commissioner Fragla touched on I struggled with this as well, because I don't want to be driving to Coburg Road to get, my car serviced at the end of the day. But I don't think this particular prohibition would create that situation. I think what it is, this is what we're saying as a community we want to go ahead and do. it's also a warning sign saying, well, we got to figure out then how we're going to balance this within the community. If we want to have walkable communities along corridors, then where are we putting our automobile sales areas? And how do we solve that problem? I think this is a chance for the community to go ahead and make a step in that direction that says, no, we're really more in favor of walkable communities than we are communities that you can't walk in because you're walking through endless, miles of asphalt on one side and busy traffic on the other side. So I think for that reason, I'm still in favor of this holdout. I'm like the rest of the commission. I think I'm troubled a little bit with what the outcome is citywide. But there's a small number of properties we're talking about, and I think it could make a big effect on those populated intersections when they're able to redevelop. If they can redevelop in a way that is not asphalt and curb cuts and drive-throughs and gas stations and gas pumps, if there's something else that develops there that is making me easier for me to walk along the street, that's the goal. That's what this is about. And we only have this one tool, and it's not perfect, but I'm still in favor of recommending that we apply it.
I have a question to that point. Thank you very much for sharing your kind of viewpoint on that, because it's helpful. And maybe this is a question for Lauren. So as part of some of the other code changes, there's some changes to the frontage and other building. So for example, if a new business that sold electric cars decide, like Archimoto wants to set up shop in River Road, the way that their site would need to be constructed would have to align with some of the other provisions with the building orientations that would then allow it to be walkable, but then it wouldn't prohibit what they're selling. You don't have to speak to that. I'm just asking about the way the orientation of the building, if that makes sense.
So Commissioner Edwards, I'll maybe actually let Terry answer the question.
Okay,
I just want to clarify what you're asking is if the commission were to recommend removing all the prohibited uses throughout the neighborhood plan area, then those uses would no longer be prohibited, but the standards that are included in the proposed code would still apply. Is that what you're asking? And the answer to that is
standards that exist now that create this scenario where we have big parking lot, because it's not just automotive sales, it's Fred Meyer. I mean, it's anything that has this big area that's really not walkable. It's Bimart. It's all of those guys. They're all C2. And so what I was trying to get at was why those appear walkable, create a walkable environment, and an automotive sale, just in the nature of the business, doesn't. Because if a new business were to establish themselves and say, like I said, they sell electric cars or something, I mean, I'm using that as, they wouldn't have to be electric. It could be, they could be anything. But my point is in that, because of the changes that we are also approving as part of this code changes, that change the way that the buildings are oriented on the properties, a new business coming in to establish themselves would automatically be required to create that walkability. I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to ask. And it really has nothing to do with what they're selling. It has more to do with, because you could put all the cars in the back and have a frontage type of thing. So I guess that's my point. I'm not trying to be difficult or be devil's advocate, but I'm just like, there's all kinds of things that I can imagine in 20 years we could be seeing or want to see, and suddenly we've created a scenario where like that kind of business can't be established in an area because we said that 20 years ago. If that makes sense. Okay. That's my clarifying. I see your hand, Commissioner Fragala. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I did just have a process question. Are we going to take each of these individually and have a motion and decide them as we go? Or are we going to take each of these individually and do another straw poll and then leave them all for the end for one big recommendation, or not if we continue to deliberate? So I'm wondering what the process will be.
Our proposal was to revisit each of the straw polls and make sure that the commission is still in the same place that it was during the last meeting, and then save the motion for the end. And so the motion that we provided to you recommends approval as modified, and you can modify it based on what happens in the meeting today. And kind of depending on the degree of change, we would ask for Lauren's help to see if you're all comfortable with letting us make those changes or bring it back to you.
Okay, so that's helpful.
Okay.
So to clarify where we're at on this particular one, do we need to request a straw poll?
Yes. And here's what I'm planning on doing. And there's still hands raised. And so I wanted to get through those. I was going to straw poll those of you who would be in favor of the carve out and see where we're at. And if there's not a majority there, then maybe looking at what the alternative would be. If you don't support a carve out, what the support would be for? Would it be to do nothing? Or, I mean, I guess that would be those would be the two options that I would put out there. So carve out or leave it as is.
Not prohibiting the uses.
And not prohibiting any uses.
I heard 3 or 4 of you express interest in that.
Yeah.
And I also think I heard everyone except Commissioner Edwards support the carve out.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think we should do the new question first.
Oh, you want to do the new question first?
Okay. Carve out if you don't do.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll do it that way. But I am going to let the other 2 commissioners speak. So Commissioner Bailing and then Commissioner Beeson.
Yes, correct me if I'm wrong, please. But when I look at the list of excluded services for C2, it does not appear to have gas stations on that list. And I would think if there is concern about fumes and fuel and impact on community and children and quality of life, that gas stations would be prohibited. That's where you've got the highest concentration of exhaust and pollution. So that's a confusion to me. Is that right? It's not on the list, correct?
It's not on the list, and I could provide a little bit more background on where this list came from. I believe that part of it was the walkability intention that Commissioner Ramey discussed, but it was also about the kinds of uses that are already proliferating in the neighborhoods. For instance, the Irvington Road C2 area that I showed you on the map is entirely self-storage, and it's surrounded by a lot of residential land that doesn't have other commercial services that could meet daily needs. So I think that's a big part of the rationale too, was to try to say we've got enough of some things and to try to make room for small neighborhood serving commercial uses.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. Commissioner Beeson, go ahead.
Thanks. This is kind of a follow-up to Commissioner Fragola and the process question. One of the things I've been thinking about since I got the slides today, I think I'll just ask it now and see if this is an appropriate time to engage this. I would like to see us consider separate recommendations when we get to that point. One for the Metro Plan amendment that includes the approval of the River Road Plan, all the things that are in that part of the approval package that we've had for a number of months, and a separate recommendation for the City of Eugene code amendments. They're kind of 2 completely separate processes one's under a city code and one's under the Metro Plan, and think they're independent action. So I'd like to put that out there, I guess, for Terry or for Lauren. Is it possible, or well, for the group, I guess, and for the chair, is it possible we could consider that separate recommendations? That would be helpful to me as we proceed on through the deliberations.
Yes.
So the answer is yes, but I wanted to get clarification. So Commissioner Beeson, you're suggesting that we want to put just all of the code amendments in block as a straw poll, whether we move forward with any of them, or maybe you guys can clarify.
So what I can offer and what staff and I talked about this afternoon is at the end of the discussion, two separate motions. One that would move the neighborhood plan and the metro plan amendments and their associated findings forward. And then a separate motion on the code amendments.
Yes.
And that would also allow, depending on how the discussion goes tonight, because it seems like the majority of discussion is centered on the code amendments, that would allow, assuming Planning Commission wants to recommend approval of the neighborhood plan, metro plan amendments, that piece to move on to the Lane County Planning Commission and kind of not delay that timing. And then if this planning commission wanted to see the code amendments come back with additional changes, or, you know, we could separate them out so as not to delay the portion of the package that needs to go to the county.
Okay. Does that make sense to everybody?
Well, it does to me. I want to say thank you. I think having the ability to consider these as two separate recommendations is, I find, to be very helpful. Thanks.
Yes. Okay. I would agree. And I think that that's a very reasonable course of action. And I think I agree. I think we're kind of where we're having a lot of discussion is specific around the code amendments. And so I think that we want to kind of be maybe more prescriptive with our recommendation and get that dialed in. And okay. So having said that, though, do we still want to go through the straw polls and we still want to talk about all these individual pieces? Okay. So I'm going to do this as I see no more hands. I'm going to go ahead and ask for a straw poll on those who wish not to make any changes to the prohibiting uses on this.
So to not prohibit specific
to not prohibit specific uses in C2 in the neighborhood area. So I'm gonna support that, but I want to just see where everybody else is. Okay, so there's 3 of us. Okay, so that fails. And based on that, I want to then straw poll those of you who are still comfortable to just move forward with the carve outs for River Road and allowing them to, and I think everybody understands where we're at with that.
River Ave.
Or I'm sorry, River Avenue. I'm looking right at it. I don't know. The carve out for River Avenue, if those are in favor, could raise their hands. I've got 1. Okay, perfect. All right.
Same as the last.
Same as before.
Okay.
So thank you.
Good.
Thank you, guys.
Good. Thank you. Clearly I should have started with the metro plan amendment. That would have been a much better order to go through, but live and learn.
We had to get warmed up.
Live and learn. Toying with the idea of skipping ahead, but no, I think we should do this, and I have faith that we're gonna make it through. Okay, so the next one is building height. And as a reminder, the proposal originally was to drop the allowable building height in the C2 zone to 60 feet. It's currently allowed to be 120. There is also in place a transition standard. So any building or property that's zoned C2 within 50 feet of a residential zone has to already drop the building height down to the same as the residential zone for a distance of 50 feet. So I wanted to make that clear, but in your discussions in the last meeting, you modified it from, that's just some examples of 120 feet. And here's some examples of 65 feet. And Amazon Corner, 62 feet. But here it is. The results of your straw poll were to revise the recommendation to a building height of 65 feet based on the examples provided and other code language in the community. That vote was pretty close. So it was 4-3 in support of limiting buildings to 65 feet in height. And so now would be your opportunity to revisit this element of the proposed code amendments.
Okay, I'll jump in, and if anyone else wants to raise their hand. So I shared with staff after having some conversations of information that's been put into the record now. So there was additional comments made that I felt that the 65 feet was prohibitive to building types that have become pretty common, especially if you're wanting to incentivize and increase commercial and retail, which is what the neighborhood had said that they were. So in talking to some developers and architects that do this work, one of the building compositions, I don't know if you would, building types is they call this a 5/2. You would be familiar. Well, the 5/2 is what they have been building, and they've got 2 floors of commercial and or so they're 2 floors with like 12 feet, and then above that the 5 floors of housing. And so this was something that's been much more, I don't know, common in the community, and it brings it's below 120, but it's significantly above 65. It's closer to about 90 is what my understanding is. So based on that, I was the tiebreaker in this. So I had shared with staff that I felt that I didn't really feel comfortable with limiting us to 65. And so I was likely in these deliberations going to be changing my original straw poll. So that's where I'm at. I don't want to, I'm just not at a point. I don't really know exactly what's the right amount, but I'm feeling like because I don't know, I don't want to make the wrong decision and eliminate, specifically because that is the neighborhood seemed to have been wanting to see more commercial and retail activity along that corridor. And so, and I don't know the ins and outs and why developers are liking that model, but anyway, that's what I'm hearing. So Commissioner Fragla, I see your hand. Sorry for babbling.
Yeah, I'm wondering if staff could elaborate on the concept that Commissioner Edwards described, and if we have any examples of that having been built in Eugene.
I am not personally familiar with any of those. I know that there has been discussion about whether there's a compromise or a different number, but in our research, which was done actually prior to your last deliberations, what we ended up being most comfortable with was recommending the 65 feet for the reasons that we described at the last meeting, mostly because it accommodates the 4/1. So like the Amazon corner and the buildings in Walnut Station that I showed in the pictures fit within 65 comfortably. And so that was the recommendation that we felt like was consistent with the community visioning process and the memo provided by Rel Broca Architects. Conversely, or just the other side of that conversation, is you all were there was really both sides discussed at the last meeting. And so there was at least 3, maybe 4 commissioners who felt like the 120 should just stay in place. So that is an option. I don't think we're prepared to have a different number as a recommendation. But changing it back to 120 is something that you could do, or just not reducing it to 65.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah.
So the 90 would be, you're saying that it's typically built as 5 residential over 2 commercial, but
Yes.
Is that in situations where commercial is required on the ground floors? Because that was also removed. So it could just be having still no commercial and 7 or 8 floors of residential. So do you know if that those buildings are in situations where commercial is required on the ground floor?
I personally don't, and I'll clarify. There were additional conversations that just in general with some housing advocacy organizations and whatnot that and I'm part of one of them, and the overall feeling was just that reducing our opportunities to build housing, because that's what we're eliminating with those extra floors. We're not eliminating a bunch of commercial at the top. It's housing. And so in talking with, it was a conversation that we had in one of our board meetings and for Better Housing Together. And it was just something that obviously we didn't weigh in as an organization, but probably will at council. And so that was sort of, also for myself personally as a housing advocate, I felt strongly about preserving what it is today. This reduces what we can do today, despite the fact that we don't have any 120-foot buildings on River Road. But what does 30 years from now look like? We just don't know. And so I didn't feel super comfortable just knowing how the time that it takes to do these refinement plans and these code amendments. And just for myself personally, I kind of felt like, and if you recall, I was very much on the fence before, and I was, clear with staff that I had a change of heart. And so that's on me. But after those further conversations, I just felt like I wanted to, reserve the right to do that.
I'd add another point. There was a discussion at the last meeting about what is the best way to incentivize neighborhood commercial on the ground floor of a mixed use building. And as a staff team, we felt like that is an issue that repeatedly, it was part of the corridor study. It was part of the planning process. There have been a lot of conversations about it. You're right. It's very important to the folks who've been involved. And as a staff team, we talked about recommending that is something that we believe that should be considered citywide, and that incentives for developing all of our corridors should be looked at as a package. And so we weren't prepared to bring you a proposal that we felt confident would actually incentivize ground floor commercial in this set of code amendments.
Yes, and it's tricky. So I have Commissioner Beeson and then Commissioner Lear.
Yeah, thanks. I've talked about this a couple of times, so I am going to try to be brief, and I've continued to think about it. I guess I also, right off the cuff, real quickly, would say I definitely think this is something I would agree ought to be looked at citywide or discussed in the context of corridor planning. This proposed amendment that's in front of us right now basically prohibits construction of any building that's higher than 5 stories. That's essentially what we would be doing. And I really don't think, I don't think we should be doing it. And particularly, I think in trying to continually emphasize, given the basically urgent need that we have for housing in our community. I think I've tried to say, I think there's benefits from potential development of some 6 to 8 story buildings out there in the next 5 to 30 years that may occur. I don't know if they'll occur, of course, and the potential development might be limited, but if they do occur, there's substantial benefits in terms of housing and the economy and so on. And I think the downside of leaving the current code in place is very limited. And we had testimony come in this last batch where I think you could really examine some of that pretty closely in terms of the limited amount of R1 in relation to the limited amount of C2. I also want to say I'm aware that there are various people in the River Road Santa Clara community that would rather not have tall buildings in the corridor, and they've expressed that through a comprehensive planning process. I think I just need to say, for me, and I've struggled with that, or I've tried to think it through, I'm trying to balance that. I think the fact is there are a substantial number of people who live in our community who would benefit from construction of new housing, particularly in an urban area like this in our city. So the heart of the question for me just kind of remains housing, climate, equity. I think the council as the decision makers, I think whenever we consider anything like this, we should be very careful that we're not making a decision that's going to restrict housing development. So I'm still kind of in the same place. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Lear, go ahead.
Yeah, and some of this is repetition, but since we're discussing it again, I would just make 3 points. The first is that greater housing density does support and nourish greater walkable retail and commercial. Second, that I'd like to also see as much consistency across zones throughout the city as possible. More special requirements and rules increases the complexity and the difficulty of development. You have to become an expert in every tiny micro zone to determine what's feasible there. And then third, when planning commissions and other civic organizations in the past took actions to limit density, it was advocated as a means of preserving or enhancing the neighborhood, and they didn't necessarily realize they were contributing to the housing crisis that we're now in. But I think we've got the ability to look forward and to avoid making those mistakes and to restricting density. That is what causes problems in terms of a housing shortage. And virtually, every major piece of legislation in the state over the past few years has been focused on trying to ease that. So I feel like we would be making a big mistake to allow that limitation of density. Some of the tall buildings that were mentioned in the slides, including those on Franklin, and there was another one by campus, those are very walkable areas. Some people may not like the look of the tall buildings, but they're walkable areas. And I don't think that those buildings coming up has reduced the walkability of it or the desirability of those areas. And lots of people transit through them all the time.
All right. Well, Commissioner Beeson, Commissioner Ramey,
Sure.
would you like to?
Whichever I am.
Would you like whichever? Just
a little bit. I'm not going to change my mind about this. The issue for me again is that tall buildings they're not a good thing in every instance. And in particular, Commissioner Lair, I don't think the statement you just said is true that taller buildings are not necessarily bad for walkable, or at least, not necessarily bad for walkable environments. I'm looking at the slide of the 2 buildings on Broadway that are 9 and 10 stories tall. And I'm thinking about how they block the sun. And I'm thinking about how they change the air patterns around them. And frankly, I'm looking at the sort of meager sidewalks in front of them. Have you walked on those sidewalks? And that's a walkable. So that's where we have a problem as a community, because I don't think that's the vision we're looking for. And so we need, until we can understand or agree about what the vision is we're looking for, we're going to have this conundrum where we're not agreeing on this issue. But to me, the lowering the level of the houses, I have read about a 2 plus 5, but I haven't seen one, I don't think. And the idea that we would have 2 stories of resident or of commercial where we're really even not sure we're ever going to have 1 story is not enough for me to think, oh, maybe we should raise the limit then. I think the examples we see in town are 1 plus 4s. And so those are perfectly capable. And I think the SERA, was it Sarah that did the overall examination?
The first corridor study.
They were talking about 65, and they were talking about feasibility. They were talking about walkability, all of that. I think the market will dictate that. And I think for me to be able to say that this corridor doesn't get 120 feet is the right way to go. And we may get 2 60s instead of 120. And we still achieve the same density, and we get it the same way that, well, sort of. But we get it in a way that is much more palatable to the pedestrian, to the bicyclist, and it's not this sort of overwhelming tall building that's in your face. So I don't know if I'm making very articulate arguments, but I haven't changed my mind about that. I think that there's plenty of detail and data in the research that was done leading us to this point, the desire of the neighbors to have a walkable community, and the work by the consultants who said, okay, well, this is what it's going to look like then. It's going to be 50, 60-foot buildings along a corridor with walkable sidewalks and open spaces. So if you believe in the vision and you understand what the vision is, then this is the way to get there. And I don't think that limits us in housing opportunities to such a degree that we should not do this. I think there's still plenty of housing capacity in the area, and I think thinking about how we're going to build that housing capacity is important, and it's important for us to say, well, this is the kind of community we want when we're done. And so I'm still with the 65.
All right. I have got Commissioner Fragola and Commissioner Isaacson with their hands raised. Go ahead, Commissioner Fragola.
Great, thank you. I am very intrigued by the 2/5. It sounds like we don't have enough information on that. I think I want to go back to something that we discussed earlier about the tools that we're providing to the community in the River Road and Santa Clara neighborhoods to create the community and vision that they're hoping to. So, the building height was an incredibly high priority expressed by the community throughout the entire process. I think even going as far back as 2017. And they've expressed a strong commitment to a vibrant pedestrian community, along with a commitment to more housing. And that was really, this 65-foot recommendation was really what came out of consultant work, the Federal Transit Authority grant study. It's not dissimilar, though somebody can correct me, but it's not dissimilar to what was in the Willamette Corridor Plan, which, also has 120 feet on the C2, but I believe in the Willamette Corridor Plan was also going to be lower. So we know from a lot of studies, consultants, that this seems to be the better design for a walkable, vibrant, pedestrian and bicycle friendly community. And initially, the way we were going to get there, or the community was going to get there, was 2 zoning areas within the transit corridor, right? So with this transit corridor plan. And there was a recognition of taller buildings along the corridor, and then with transitions to R1. We all know that tool no longer became accessible to the River Road and Santa Clara communities, for a variety of reasons. And then there's also the setbacks of the pandemic. That transit plan that corridor plan was a great plan. We talked about frequently on the Planning Commission what a great plan it was, and how exciting and excited people were about the work that had been done. It was even acknowledged that it could be a model for other parts of the city. But we lost that tool, right? So then again, we're back to what is the tool that we're offering to the community in this part of the city to fulfill the work and the vision that they've had. And it's become these code amendments. You may even recall that during the, blanking on words, the Willamette Greenway Code, the height issue came up again because of the concern about, if you look at some of the C2, it's rather close to the Greenway. And so the concern about having very tall buildings that close to the Greenway. Some of that C2 backs right up onto the bike path. And so again, we're like, no, the Greenway is not the tool. And I agree, it wasn't the tool for this outcome that's desired. But this is the tool that we've offered them. And again, it's not perfect, but we're looking at a small number of parcels of C2. And I think we have to ask ourselves, what happens when we engage a community for quite a long time, quite a long process, quite an incredible effort, and then we take away some of the tools that were available to them. And I'm not saying when I say we, I'm not pointing any fingers. It's lots of changes coming down the pike. But what kind of responsibility do we have to supporting the tools that we do provide to them? And so that is, based on, I agree with much of what Commissioner Ramey said about the information that we know about developing these walkable communities that are pedestrian and bicycle friendly. I think the 65 is upheld by a lot of that data and study, as well as how do we honor the work that has been done and the changes that have impacted. So that's just some of how I've been thinking about it. I think I do think it will still provide opportunities for housing. And I do think it'll provide opportunities for the neighborhood to come along to potentially more diverse, more not diverse, dense, more density as it continues to build up. So that's how I've been thinking about it, and I still support the 65 foot recommendation that staff has made. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Commissioner Fragla. Thank you. I will turn to Commissioner Isaacson, who I believe had his hand up as well.
Thank you, Chair. I think our record, both as in the Planning Commission as well as the city, is pretty strong in that our desire to build more housing. So I really don't see this as a binary issue between do we create more housing or less housing, but because when we were doing middle housing, the title said what we were focused on. We were focused on housing. The title here is neighborhood. It's housing as a component, but it's not the core factor. It's how does this particular housing that we're choosing fit into the neighborhood? And only because I just watched it with my son again, the movie Up, I'm just reminded of Carl. He's got this small little house and all this development goes shooting up around him. That's not a neighborhood that he wants to live in. And I think that's not a neighborhood that a lot of folks in River Road want to live in. They don't want to live one lot adjacent to an 8 or 9 story building. And I think that we can find a happy medium between building more housing and having the neighborhood for which we're asking people to come and live in. Otherwise, the other spaces that don't provide housing are secondary. I mean, the Greenway is a wonderful place to build. We could build there, right? We don't, because it's a trusted and valued jewel of that neighborhood, and it entices people to move there. And this is just another component of that for me. I yield back.
Okay. All right. I don't see any other hands up. Commissioner Laird?
I think that the comparison to the Greenway is interesting, but I do think these areas are also extremely distinct. And the character of this neighborhood is not necessarily currently extremely walkable and going to get ruined by large buildings. It's a very commercial kind of a stretch as is. If I think of Division Ave in Portland, say in the 30s, I don't know how often the rest of the commission spends time up there. The buildings are pretty tall, but you can still see the sky. It's still walkable. And in fact, it's one of the most bustling neighborhoods there because there are people there. That's what makes it walkable. It's not walkable because people drive over to it and park somewhere and then walk down the avenue. It's because the people live there. And that's what draws in the shops and the energy that makes it one of the most fun neighborhoods to walk around in Portland. So I do think that there are different ways to get to the same result. Whether or not we like the aesthetics of a large building, I don't think really has a strong impact on whether it's walkable, bikeable, or accessible.
All right. Thank you all. These are really important comments. And so I think how I want to straw poll this one, similarly to the last one, is that I want to first ask all of those who would be in favor of not reducing the heights from the current allowable 120 feet and just go with that. And we'll start there. And then otherwise I will poll those who would like to see that. So based on that, all of those who are in favor of keeping the 120 feet limitation, I want to see hands raised for that. So I'm going to raise mine.
As is, right?
Yes, so as is. Keeping it as is. All right. I think there are 3 of us. Okay, and then those of you who would be in favor of reducing heights, and we're saying 65, there is no other option. Okay, so reducing heights down to 65. And so if those folks will raise their hands. Okay, and then now we have 4. Okay, so same vote, just different people.
Same vote, different people, but great discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, we're
next one.
Ready for the next one. Okay, like I said, we should have started with this one. This one was the unanimous straw poll. We discussed this quite a bit in your last meeting. Originally, staff had proposed repealing the 1987 Urban Facilities Plan and replacing it with the new neighborhood plan. And through the discussion, two options were discussed. Both the original proposal, which was to adopt the new neighborhood plan and repeal the 87 plan, or the option of keeping both plans in place. And that was explained in your memo, but basically it's because it's technically possible because the plans serve different purposes and they don't directly conflict with one another. We did add a statement to the beginning of the neighborhood plan clarifying the relationship between the 2 plans. And if there are any conflicts, the neighborhood plan controls, but they are different tools. So you discussed that and then eventually had a straw poll 7-0 in favor of keeping both plans. So if anything's changed, now's the time to talk about that.
Okay, I can't see folks, but I think, for me, I was very supportive when I heard that this was actually what the neighborhood participants were asking for and recommending. So they were supportive of that. And I think that was largely what earned everybody's support for that. But if anybody has anything to say that would change their straw poll on this, let me know. We can straw poll this one again. So I will say all of those in favor of keeping both plans, go ahead and raise your hands. Looks like we still have majority.
Like
unanimous.
Yeah, that was the easy one. Thank you. Okay, we're not quite done though. There is a chance to discuss any other changes the commission would like to make before making a recommendation to the council. And again, we will get to motions at the very end, but before we get there, there was one thing that staff wanted to bring up that we see as a tweak. I'm just looking for my email. Here it is. And this started to come up when we were talking about the code amendments and prohibited uses and new standards for building frontage and windows to avoid a long blank wall. So some of the testimony questioned whether the blank length of wall standard should apply to all sides of the building, or if it really would be better to only require that standard on the street frontage. And staff agreed with that. And so that's a pretty minor tweak by adding one word to the code. Where it currently says a blank length of wall more than 20 linear feet is prohibited along any facade, we would insert the word street facing. And so it would say a blank length of wall of more than 20 linear feet is prohibited along any street facing facade. And that's the kind of change that we can make if you give us clear direction that you support it. Also, Kelly Whitmell's here. If you have any questions about administration of that code standard, Kelly's the expert in the room. But we wanted to offer that one up because it was a specific thing that was brought up in testimony and that we thought could easily be addressed.
My one question about it is, what is it, just any street facing? So it doesn't have to be the main street that it's on. Like if it's on a corner and the other street is this, I think there was an example of something that Beltline was.
Oh, that's a good question.
So there's like some streets there that are right along Beltline.
Kelly? Right.
So that's what I was thinking.
Would it be
like,
the
I don't know if you'd want
that it has frontage on?
Yeah.
Just to clarify, I am Kelly Whitnell. Just to clarify, I did confirm that Beltline, it would not be considered a street for these purposes based on the definition of street. So we have considered Beltline not to be a street. But yes, for the other streets, it would apply to both sides unless you make a different recommendation, I suppose.
I think that seems reasonable. Okay.
I have a question.
Commissioner Ramey,
So
go.
how are these standards different from the other standards in C2 that are smeared across the rest of the city?
Currently in C2, there is not a requirement that you don't have a blank wall every 20 feet. It is currently in the Walnut Station zone that has that language, the special area zone along Franklin.
Well, I'm thinking there are parts of our code that do address building articulation. Where is that?
So we have building articulation in multifamily standards. We also have articulation in large commercial facility standards.
Okay, that's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, the 25, that'd be buildings over 25,000.
The big bucks
commercial
code. So does that have the same idea where you have windows regardless of whether it faces the street? I mean, how do we get to what that is? Or is there any parallel between those since that's already in place?
Say that again.
The big box code, and does it require articulation on all walls and windows on all walls, or just on the main facade which faces the street?
To be honest, I cannot be sure. I'd have
Well, it just seems like it would be consistent. We already have a code that people are used to. So we just point to that. I mean, not literally point, but that's what we based this on, was that code. So.
And I did, and I don't have that in front of me, but I had in my email mentioned with windows.
I think it's not there. I didn't.
Oh, you didn't
copy all of it.
Sorry.
Yeah, I could look it up. So
okay, well, it's
quickly
because it had more information. It had information about where it applied and what for windows and which facade it applied.
Right.
Any other questions on that particular? For me, I just thinking of some examples of big buildings, like Commissioner Ramey mentioned, that I feel like they may have I don't know. I'm just trying to picture something in the built environment that would be an example of where you might not want to have required windows. And, you know, for example, I mean, if you had an adjacent, if there was well, I suppose you wouldn't be able to do that anyway. So I'm picturing Bi-Mart, right? And if Bi-Mart was on the street that North Eugene High School's on, it's not, but let's pretend it is. And it's over a little bit further north. You would we be required to have windows along that side? But I think right now there would be parking. Anyway, I don't know. I'm just trying to think about why, like, there would be scenarios that I would think that you wouldn't want to have windows, or the type of business maybe even.
Well, so currently the proposed standard would require the windows to break up any blank length of wall, no matter where it's facing into the interior of the property, facing. What staff is proposing is to limit that requirement to only the street facing.
Right.
So it's a limitation of the current proposal.
So that's the current code or the current proposal? Yes, that's what I'm trying to just decide between, is what the existing standard is and what we would be doing with these changes. And so the proposal was adding windows along, the outside. I mean, I don't have strong opinions about it, but I feel like there's probably some scenario that you would think, oh, now they have to have windows. Do they have to be, I don't mean functional as in they have to open, but do they have to actually be visible windows? Or because I've seen businesses that, because of whatever, they block the windows. They're almost decorative from the outside. So could that be?
This standard explicitly allows for windows, arcades, colonnades,
just something,
or main entrances. So something to break. It is much like the building articulation standard. Something to bring up that big,
to just break it up
wall.
Okay.
I'll also point out that these standards are adjustable, which requires an
adjustment review, but
a new process. Yes, but they are. It is something that can be adjusted.
Okay. Oh, Commissioner Isaacson.
Thank you. You asked for some examples. So the yoga studio on River Road, I don't remember the address, but it's just past Hatton Lane, has windows that are there but covered, but the owners aren't the craziest about them, because if you're working at a studio, you don't want to feel like you're in a fishbowl with traffic driving right down. The dojo that is on the south end of River Road is kind of the same way. Both dispensaries on River Road are the same way. They're actually barred from having, they have to cover up their windows anyway by state statute. So there are definite businesses where having a window is not really part of their business plan. But I also understand that unless they own the building and forever will, the next person may not. So, but I'm a little leery about forcing those businesses to incur more costs to meet with, just because we want everything to look the same.
So just to clarify that then, Commissioner Isaacson, because you're talking about the proposal would be doing that. So the current standard would not require that.
Right.
So what I'm hearing from you is that maybe you are supportive of just the current standard, not even a revised form of that.
It's the aggregate for me. So I'm just getting clarification. You asked for what kind of businesses, and I just wanted to provide that clarification.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. So I do have other hands. I think Commissioner Beeson and then Commissioner Fragola.
Commissioner Fragola was ahead of me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Commissioner Fragola, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Actually, a little Zoom factoid is that the program actually lines them up in the order they were raised. So that's one way to know. But I would have been fine going second. I also. So so Lauren, could you clarify what you said about it's not just windows that have to break up the facade? What else could also break up the facade?
Sure, I'll have the code in front of you. Read the Lauren standard. So the proposed standard that would apply to C2 in this area says a blank length of wall of more than 20 linear feet is prohibited along any building facade. Windows, arcades, colonnades, or main entrances can be used to address this standard. So you could use any of those things to break up the blank wall that is more than 20 linear feet.
Okay, so businesses have options besides the windows. They could put a colonnade or something else in. Arcade is like a recess where maybe plants might go or something like that, or an entrance. So, going back to some of the comments that Commissioner Ramey said, walkable communities, you want to have these facades facing towards the street or where the sidewalk is that are going to be attractive to the community members. And so I support breaking up the facade that's facing the street, but I also support the recommendation or the tweak that staff is bringing to us today, that it not be all 4 sides, or I guess 5 or 8. We don't always have to have squares for buildings, but that it's the one facing the street. So I'm in support of staff's recommendation.
Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Beeson and then Commissioner Lear. And then we'll straw poll. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I'm kind of looking for a brief answer here. I want to be careful because I'm going to expose my ignorance, which is with respect to, as Commissioner Isaacson was asking the question, and we were talking a bit about some of these existing buildings. My question is, if you've got a situation out there with a lot of different businesses in the C2, and if the council passes this and we put all of this in place, I'm thinking there's a good number of them that are going to be non-conforming with respect to the setbacks or the amount of blank wall or the number of windows and so on. And I've assumed, I think as I've gone through the material over the months, that that would be okay, so long as, until they decide to remodel or to expand or make some kind of changes, and then they're going to have to do a variety of things to bring themselves into compliance. Am I, Terry or Lauren or somebody, am I thinking of that right?
I'm gonna let Kelly take this one.
Yeah. Yes. So when it comes to legal nonconforming, if it's something is legal nonconforming, it can remain. For the setbacks, okay, the setback will apply. The maximum setback will apply if more than 100%, or if the building is increased by more than 100% along a street facing facade. So that's the starting point. If you're doing an addition that isn't 100% of that, the length of the wall along the street, then the setback won't apply, but the design standards will. So as an addition is created and designed, they will have to make sure that portion of the building does comply with the new standards related to windows and blank wall facades.
So if we, so if we approve that, and I'm actually, I concur with all of this. I think it's this in place, then there are businesses that are going to have to take steps now to comply.
No, not until they choose to move forward.
Okay, not until, okay.
With a redevelopment of some sort. Another clarification I would just like to make is that currently the setback applies, it's just would be 20% as opposed to 80%. So if someone had an increase or someone developed a property with an addition that met the requirement for the maximum setback, then it would be required.
Okay, I think that seems like it provides a little bit more flexibility. I think the preferred way for me to see it would be in a change to the C2. But if that's not possible or that or outside of scope, then I think the tweak makes sense here.
Okay. So I will do a straw poll on just this one item. If anyone needs clarification, please let me know. But the straw poll, the item on the straw poll is the commission, any of the commissioners who would support staff's recommendation to adjust the recommended code change from requiring on all sides to just the street sides. Is everybody clear on that? That's really clunky. I apologize.
I can restate it.
Okay, Terry's going to restate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So the staff would support a tweak to the recommended code language so that it would read, a blank length of wall of more than 20 linear feet is prohibited along any street facing facade. And that is rather than any facade around the building.
All right. Is that clear for everybody? So all of those who would support that change, go ahead and raise your hand. I want to be able to see everybody. All right. Unanimous.
Okay.
There we go. Making progress.
99% done. No. But I do need to say, are there any other changes, or Chair, you could say, are there any other changes or modifications that the commission wishes to put forward?
Yes. And are you, and this would be specific to code changes, correct? Or anything?
Probably, but it could.
I would probably prefer to leave it with that for now. Like, so let's ask that question first. If there were any other items in the code revisions that stuck out or anybody wanted to flag or discuss. Obviously we kind of pulled out the major ones, but if there was anything else. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So we're good.
Good. I have a suggested motion on the screen that's a little different than the one that was sent out a couple hours ago. And we've further discussed modifying it throughout this meeting. So right now it says it's one motion, and it says move to recommend council adopt the River Road plan, the Metro Plan amendments and findings, and the code amendments and findings that are attached and as modified through your discussion. But we instead are going to, Lauren's got some language to separate out the motions.
Okay. And can I ask maybe for some clarification? We had some clear, there's straw polls on all of those, and there, I think, yeah, there was clear direction.
I can read them back to you though.
But I want to make sure that we understand the purpose of splitting those up. Oh, would that just to be to allow regardless? So just in case we come to an impasse on the code revisions. In that, if that's the case, we would want to be able to continue to move the other items that are largely agreed upon. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
And also it makes some procedural sense in the sense that only the city is considering the code amendments. And so having kind of one recommendation on the code amendments that is city specific, and then another that affects both the city.
Okay. I think that makes good sense. All right.
So, and I think it allows for a little bit more flexibility when we come to the motion on the code amendments. I will ask the commission if you're comfortable with kind of giving staff direction in terms of the tweak that you approved to the street facing facades and just saying, make the change and send it on to council, or if you would want to see the code amendments come back to you one more time for kind of a final approval. So, but let's start with the neighborhood plan and metro plan amendments. So the motion that I would offer, if someone wants to make it, is move to recommend that the city council adopt the River Road Santa Clara neighborhood plan, the metro plan amendments, and associated findings. The River Road Santa Clara neighborhood plan and metro plan amendments and associated findings attached as attachments B and C to the December 5th, 2023 agenda item summary. And if that motion is made and seconded, then you would be moving forward a recommendation that council adopt the neighborhood plan and the metro plan amendments and the findings associated with those things that are included in today's packet.
Yes. Okay. Oh, Commissioner. Oh, I got two commissioners with their hands up. Maybe someone can tell me who is, I apologize, you guys, because I don't see the participants list. I just see you on the screen in it.
Order.
I would think so,
Yeah,
right?
no, they
okay.
are.
Okay. So Commissioner Fragola, Dan, pointing to the wrong side. Commissioner Fragola, and then Commissioner Isaacson.
So moved. Can I just say so moved?
Of course you can. Okay, so we have a motion. Let me ask for a second, and then we can do a discussion. Does that work?
I was going to second the motion.
Oh, well, there we go. A motion and a second. Okay, now I can ask if there's any discussion. Okay, Commissioner Lear, go for it.
So just to be clear, this would be everything that we've discussed today with the exception of the tweaking.
This is not the code amendments.
Oh, okay.
This is the neighborhood plan, the 2023 neighborhood plan, and the the proposed amendments to the metro
The metro
plan
plan,
that
gotcha,
take out
yeah.
the River Road Santa Clara policies and.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Clear as mud for everybody? Okay. All those in favor of the motion?
We got some.
Oh, we have a hand. Sorry, Commissioner Beeson. And he's like this. No, what?
And Commissioner Fragla as well.
Oh, Commissioner Fragla. Her hand is harder to see, but go ahead. Commissioner Fragla, then Commissioner Beeson.
And so I know we're keeping the 87 facilities plan, and so we're not repealing it, so we don't need to make any motion on that, but I'm just wanting to clarify that that is consistent with the motion that was just made.
Thank you, Commissioner Fragla. That is correct. The materials that are included in today's agenda item summary have been modified based on Planning Commission's direction at the last meeting to remove any repeal of the 1987 plan.
Great, thank you.
Okay, now Commissioner Beeson.
Well, it's been at least 7 years, if not more. I think, as we've heard, that people have worked on this. So I think before we vote, and again, I will be brief, but I want to make a comment. I mean, I've been through the plan several times. I'm definitely in favor of it. I think it's a very good document. I think it's a very good piece of work. I think it's very comprehensive. It's well thought out. It clearly represents this kind of a framework, if you will, a policy framework or a planning framework that the neighbors have put together out there. They've done it under the auspices, I guess, if you will, of a council-approved process and with the able assistance of staff, and have brought it forward to this point. So again, I've spent quite a bit of time in it. Part of it has been trying to make my own connections with the code proposals back into the plan. But I'm very much in favor of it. So I'm ready to vote in support. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. And I think we're ready for a vote. So I will ask for all of those in favor to go ahead and raise hands so I can see. And it is unanimous. Fabulous. Wonderful. Okay. So now we're going to split out the code amendments.
So I think as I was kind of looking around at faces when I was talking before, that I was getting the sense that Planning Commission would be okay with a recommendation that entrusted to staff to make the small tweak related to street facing facades rather than all facades, and not need to see the materials come back one more time, that we could just move those on to council. So that being the case, then my proposed motion is move to recommend that the city council adopt the code amendments and associated findings attached as attachment D to the December 5th, 2023 agenda item summary with the following changes. Amend the standards in Eugene Code section 9.2170 sub 13 sub B sub 3 so that they only apply to street facing facades.
Okay. Commissioner Isaacson, I see your hand.
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. Commissioner Beeson seconded?
Yeah.
All right. Is there any discussion? So I have just kind of a procedural question. So were there 3 or 4 items? I thought there were 4, right? So there was the heights, the business, prohibited businesses,
the repeal
of
the 1987 plan.
Oh yeah, no, I just meant with the code amendments.
Height,
Height?
the prohibited
Non-conforming.
uses, and the
Street
tweak to the street
cutout.
facing facades.
Okay, so 3 things. Okay. I'm mentioning that because I was in the minority on 2 of those things. And so I probably will not support moving forward with the entire thing, but I would imagine that the majorities will prevail. So just, I want to put that out there that based on where we landed on those things, I don't think that it makes sense for me to support moving those particular items forward. So just want to clarify so there's no surprises. Commissioner Beeson, you have your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I would say at this point, I'm not going to vote in favor of moving the code amendments forward. And we've had a lot of discussion about various items. I guess my quick comment about it. I'm really appreciative right now of the process and the Planning Commission has used here. I think we had some very good discussion over the last several meetings. I think particularly tonight we've had some very good discussion. It's my view. I think it's not anything complex or anything, but we're here in part to provide our perspective back to the city council. And there is a lot of importance for us to wade in to some of this stuff and to do it in detail. It's great that the process has gone on for as long as it has, but it's at a point where we're making a recommendation back to the council. And I think they really appreciate that we have gone into the issues and discussed them the way that we have. I found a lot of things I heard, although I didn't completely agree, to be pretty compelling and pretty clear and pretty thoughtful. So I think for that purpose, we've provided a lot of good information and a good foundation for the city council to take this on. So I would thank my colleagues around the table and around the stratosphere here for all their work. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Beeson. Commissioner Fragola.
Thank you. I've also enjoyed our scope and flavor of the conversations that we've had. But for my own clarification, what's the motion on the table? We're not voting on the code package right now. We're just talking about the frontage.
No, you are. The motion would be a recommendation to move forward all of the code amendments with the tweak that we change any facade to street facing facade for that building articulation standard.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. I thought we had to vote on the tweak, as we're all calling it. So, all right, great. So I understand the motion on the table now, and I'm in support of recommending the code package to City Council.
Okay. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, I will go ahead and call for the vote on the motion before us. All of those in favor, please raise your hand. And all of those in opposition. And I guess there's 3 of us. So there's 4 in favor. All right.
4-3.
All right.
Yeah.
I think we got through it, you guys.
I think we did. Thank you very much. I also agree. That was a great discussion.
Thank you. Yes. Very, very much appreciate.
I have a question.
Sure.
So in the past, when we've had these kinds of actions where we were moving forward to the council, someone would go to the council and get a spot at the public hearing to say, this is what we did. And I think that's really important in particular this time, because in the past, I think it wasn't middle housing. It was the one that came before that. Clear and objective. But we agreed as a commission, we would take it forward 6-0-7-0, even though we disagreed on some of the details, because we didn't want to confuse the council. So it's our role as a planning commission to be very directive. This is what we're doing. I didn't agree with that. I thought it was important that minority opinions be expressed. And so whomever is taking it forward to the council, whether it's the chair, I think it's the chair's prerogative to do that. Be sure you, and you will, because you were in the minority. So be sure you explain that but obviously the commission voted, right? They'll recognize that, but be sure you recognize the minority opinions as well.
Yeah. Well, and I would just say, I'm happy to do that. And I would be very much true to the process and honor the I mean, but I also would want support from the commission to if that is something you'd like me all to do, is to do that. And I'm happy to, I typically script my remarks because I want to keep within the time limit, and I'm happy, you know, if the commission would like to review my prepared remarks to just talk about kind of where we landed and how, I'm happy to do that. So if you all would support that, and maybe just let me know if you don't. Commissioner Isaacson, go ahead.
I don't have any problem. I trust you, Commissioner Edwards, to be able to communicate what went on here. I guess it's a question for staff. Is there? I don't think there's any rule that that prevents the council from hearing more than the allotted time limit. I always found that bizarre that we're essentially kind of grouped into public comment when we're being asked by our boss to rank recommendations to them. And I think that the time limit should reflect the need, right? So I'm just wondering if there is any willingness for staff to have that conversation with council to kind of set a precedent going forward, because it really constricts our ability to communicate what goes on in this room. If Tiffany only has, or excuse me, Commissioner Edwards only has a minute and a half, 90 seconds to be able to describe what went on positively and what went on to the minority.
I would offer a couple of things, because I don't know, and I think that that's really kind of the mayor typically decides what the time limits are. But what I do generally, because I run into this frequently when I'm testifying in front of policy bodies, I submit something in writing, and so I would be happy to draft a letter that summarizes, and then I can kind of summarize it a little bit better in in oral testimony that I can shorten up and then direct them to please reference the unlimited time. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
I presume in the drafting of that staff will be a part of the team that drafts that letter, right? We don't want to drift off into some weird thing we're unaware of.
Some options.
Get carried away with our emotions.
Into weird.
I mean, that's my experience when I have done this. We work together on the draft, and then.
So what some of you will remember that for Clear and Objective, Commission did submit a letter to the City Council, and that was initially drafted by staff and then approved by, I think it was the full Commission. Mm-hmm. When an individual commissioner is being asked to speak on behalf of the body, it is my recommendation that the body formally delegate that authority to, so in this case, Commissioner Edwards. You can do that through motion and a vote.
Okay.
There's some time before the public hearing, so there would be time for, at a later commission meeting, the commission to consider written remarks that might be submitted to council to, and that could be in lieu of or in addition to whatever testimony you want to provide, Commissioner Edwards. So there are a lot of options, and I think maybe it makes the most sense if the commission wants to delegate to you tonight the ability to speak on the commission's behalf at the public hearing. I think that's fine. Beyond that, I would recommend waiting, maybe giving staff some direction tonight if there are written materials that you'd like staff to kind of take a crack at drafting, and then they can come back to you at a later meeting for discussion and approval in an open meeting.
I like that recommendation. Commissioner Fragola, I see your hand up, and then I'll see what everybody feels about that idea.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just was going to say what I recalled from in the past was that staff created a draft and then, collaborated with the person who was going to speak but brought it to us because it is a letter that is coming from the commission. So I'm very supportive of Commissioner Edwards representing us and comfortable with the process that we've used in the past. So thanks for that opportunity to do that as a commission.
Okay. Commissioner Beeson.
I just want to offer real quickly, when we did Clear and Objective, well, first off, I'm very I think Commissioner Edwards going forward the way that she described is fine with me. And I was, as I listened to Commissioner Isaacson, I was reminded of the clear and objective what we did at that time. We had quite a bit we wanted to say to the council. So we had 3 people actually in succession deliver 3 minutes worth of remarks each. And not suggesting we do that this time, but I think that it was a bit unusual. And anyway, that's what we did.
I recall that now. I would say we could maintain those options if we do have a lot to say. I could easily see it. But I do think we could probably refine it at a later point in time. We do have time. And I think that we could probably even just plan for maybe if staff can come back with a draft, and then we can discuss it from that point and decide which course of action, because whether it be myself or, there could be someone else even more appropriate, or I don't know, but yeah.
So assuming for the moment that the letter would be signed by Commissioner Edwards on behalf of the Planning Commission, does it make sense for staff to work with Commissioner Edwards between now and some time in the future to put together a draft, which then can be given to the entire commission for your approval? And at that point, assuming the commission is comfortable with the letter, you could then kind of give the thumbs up on the letter and delegate the authority to Commissioner Edwards to take that letter to the public hearing and to speak on behalf of the commission.
That sounds good to me. I want to see whatever. I'm seeing head nods. Do we need a vote on any of that? I would think we would need a vote if we were taking action, but I think for now,
I'm comfortable with head nods. There's no
is that okay?
Work product at this point. Yeah.
Okay. We will do a more official vote when we have something before us. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm good with that. Everyone else is good with that. Are there any other items from staff, or does Alyssa have updates for us?
I have a few updates. So your last meeting of 2023 is next week on the 12th. This one's a little unusual for you in that it's it is a public meeting, which all of your meetings are, but this one is on this very specific topic of severe cost burden in housing. It's actually a requirement of state law that the city hold this public meeting because we have been identified as a severe cost burden community. And in the past, this has been held by the Housing Policy Board, who is currently inactive. So we decided that you guys would make sense to be holding this meeting. So you're going to get a lot of information from our Community Development Division about what cost burden means and what severe cost burden means and what their programs are. And then you'll hear more about what planning is also doing for housing. 2 things. This will be completely virtual. Okay. And then you are going to, this is unusual for Zoom for you all, but you're going to get a panelist invite this time. Normally you just click and you're in the waiting room and then we let you in. For this particular meeting, you're going to get a panelist invite. If you ignore your panelist invite, you're going to have to register and answer some questions that are really geared for the public who we've invited to attend this meeting. Okay. You can do it that way, but we'd prefer that you go through the panelist route. Your AIS for that one came out today, and you'll notice in there that we did send notice, or the city did send notice about this to all renters. So it'll be curious to see how many people show up. It is virtual again. And then in January, your first meeting is January 9th. It's a public hearing on a Metro Plan Amendment zone change. It is quasi-judicial. It's for property out. It's off Pitchford, which is out off West 11th, out off like Willow Creek area. So don't talk to your friends about that one. On January 23rd, you'll have a work session on climate-friendly areas. The report is nearly complete. Maybe it is complete. Anyway, that'll be your opportunity to talk about it. I have a feeling that would also be a good meeting for us to come back with any memo or letter to council on River Road, Santa Clara. And then we'll be bringing hopefully back the public involvement plan for urban growth strategies and comprehensive plans at your first meeting in February. So we've got, yeah, a nice steady pace of things coming for you. And then just as an FYI, in January, council is going to be taking up the middle housing remand. They'll have a work session on the 10th, a public hearing on the 16th, and then potentially action by the end of the month. And if you remember, that's on a pretty specific issue related to Goal 11 and public facilities. I think that's all I have. I just want to thank you again for, well, I'm saying thank you. Yeah, I want to thank you for your work on River Road Santa Clara. It's really always fun to watch you, listen to you all deliberate, and just how thoughtful, and it's just fun to watch, and exciting to see, yeah, where this heads next. So thank you for your work on that.
Well, thank you. Any other items from commissioners before we adjourn? Okay, I'm picking up the gavel. All right, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn our meeting for this evening. So thank you all.